Hello and welcome to Algebra 2 tutorial. We are taking a look at part 2 for sine and cosine functions as waves, as graphs, as equations. So we took a look at what it meant to have an amplitude and a midline last time. Now we're actually going to see that in action by doing a few problems. So first, we're going to take a look at how to go from a graph to an equation, and then we're going to go from an equation to a graph. So let's start with the graph to equation. I'm going to give us a graph, and from that we are going to identify the amplitude and the midline. And then we'll be able to write our equation. Those are the only two transformations we're going to look at right now. So first one, we can eyeball pretty much everything. If I look at this graph, we can see the middle, the midline, and that's usually the best place to start. So here I can see the middle is right here at 4. So I'm going to label that midline is y equals 4. Once I have the midline, I can also see the amplitude. So the amplitude again goes from the middle to the top or from the middle to the bottom. It should be the same. If they're not, you don't have the middle for the midline. So how far do we go? We're at 4, 5, 6, up to about 7. So that was a plus 3. Let's check going down. So if we're at 4, 3, 2, 1, that also looks like that is a minus 3. So our amplitude looks good here at 3. Now those are the only two transformations I'm doing on this one, so we are ready for our equation. So y equals, amplitude is the first number. So now we have to decide, is this sine or is this cosine? So remember, sine starts in the middle. So here we're in the middle, and then it's going up from the midline. So that one is definitely sine. Cosine would have started up here at the top. So 3 sine of x. We're not changing anything in the middle yet. That will come later. And so now our midline is at the end, our vertical shift. We have been moved up 4. So plus 4 for our midline. So there's our equation of this graph. All right, next one. This one is a little bit harder because you can't eyeball the middle. I know my midline is in here somewhere, but it doesn't look like it's exactly 2. So we have to do a little bit of math to figure out where the middle is first. So because all this is talking about vertical, I need to know my amplitude, which is up and down. We take a look at the y values. So 1.2 and negative 4.2. First thing we do is we subtract those to find the total distance from top to bottom. So we'll do 1.2 minus 4.2. Not minus 4.2. That number is a negative 4.2. And so these double negatives here actually become positive. So that total distance is 5.4. Now that's the total distance from bottom to the top. The amplitude, which is only half of that, because there is a midline in here somewhere. We're not exactly sure where yet. And the amplitude is only half of that distance from the bottom to the top. So if I take this number and divide it by 2, I will have the amplitude. So half of 5.4 is 2.7. There we go. It's a bad decimal, but there we go. So that means this is minus 2.7, and this is plus 2.7. So we have our amplitude at least. Well, if we know how far up and down we're going, we can now find our midline. We can either take the 1.2 and subtract 2.7 down to here, or we can take the negative 4.2 and add and go up 2.7. We should land at the same number. And so we'll take I think the easiest if we take 1.2 and subtract 2.7. All right, I'd recommend just do that on a calculator. If you want to do the borrowing, you certainly can, but you get negative 1.5. So our midline here is down at negative 1.5. Okay, negative 1.5. And that would also check out with the 4.2 down here as well. So now we've got enough to start writing our equation. So y equals, our amplitude is 2.7. Now, is this sine or cosine? That's the next thing we want to ask ourselves. So if we take a look at our midline, the starting point is now way up here at the top. So because that's our starting point, that is cosine. Cosine starts on top. And then our midline is negative 1.5. So that's how you can do it if you don't know where the middle is just by eyeballing it. First, we found the total distance. Then we cut that in half to find our amplitude. And once you have the amplitude, you can either add it or subtract it to find where the middle is. All right, so that's going from graph to equation. Now we have to go backwards. If I give you the equation, can you draw the graph? So here we've got two equations, and we will turn them into graphs. So first, again, it's important to identify all the characteristics. We've got a 5 in front. That will be our amplitude. And we've got a negative 1 in the back. That will be our midline. I should make that an equation. Y equals negative 1 to be very precise there. It is a horizontal line after all. So y equals negative 1. So now let's draw this graph. So first, I'm going to put an entire period for cosine. That we're not changing, so our period for cosine is still 360 degrees. So it has 4 parts, remember? So we cut that into 4 pieces. And I usually just cut it in half twice in my mind. So half of 360 is 180. Half of 180 is 90. And then I can sort of fill in the rest. So 90 plus 90 is 180. 180 plus 90 is 270. 270 plus 90 is 360. And then if you want to keep going, you can, just by simply adding 90. Now we're going to use our midline and amplitude to figure out what the rest of this graph needs to be. So our middle here is going to be at negative 1. So I'll put this down here. My midline is right here at negative 1. So I'm going to draw a dashed line straight as I can here at negative 1. So that's going to be the middle of my wave. Now from there, this graph is going to go up and down. How far? That's the amplitude. So we're going to go up 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that will make us land all the way up here at 4. We're also going to go down 5. So if we go down 5 from here, that will put us way down at negative 6. So our graph is going to bounce between these two. I should make that negative 6 a little bit lower, shouldn't I? So extend this down. That looks pretty good, right about there, negative 6. So there is our top and there is our bottom. Now we're ready to draw our wave. So it's a cosine wave. So where does cosine start? Cosine starts at the top. So my first dot, my starting point, is up here at the top. Then my 4 quadrants, I guess you could say. The next one is in the middle. Then cosine goes to the bottom. Then back to the middle. And then on one full period, we are back to where we started at the top. So there we have one period of our wave, and it does keep going. So each of these tick marks, we can just continue that pattern for our wave. And then try to make it as wave-like as you can. And there we go. All right, one more. So again, we have a sine wave this time. We got to identify the two characteristics. We have an amplitude. That's the number in front, -4. We have a midline, -3. So we're going to start putting all these characteristics onto our graph. Let's see, I see lots of negatives, so I'm going to put more space below the graph than above it. So here's my x-axis, and here's my y-axis. I'm not changing the period on us this time again, so our period is again 360 degrees. Cut it in half, gives us 180, and then 90, and 270 there. Now our midline is down here at -3, so I'm going to come down here to -3 and draw the midline. That's usually where you want to start, at the midline. Now from that midline we're going to go our amplitude. Our amplitude goes up 4 and down 4, both directions. So if I start here and go up 4, that's going to make me land here at +1. And if I go down 4, that's going to make me land here at -7. So our graph is going to bounce between -7 and +1. I think we're ready to draw this graph. So because we are sine, sine starts on the midline, in the middle. So this time my starting point is right here on the midline. So compare that before. When we did cosine, we started at the top. Sine starts in the middle. Now sine usually starts in the middle and goes up. But because our amplitude is negative, we have been reflected. So now we are starting by going down. We're going this way. So on the first quadrant here, we'll be at the bottom. Then we go back up to the middle. Then back up to the top. I know it's very tempting to put it here on the x-axis, but we're just using the x-axis as a reference. We are bouncing between +1 and -7. And then back down to the middle. And that is one complete wave, but if you did want to keep going, remember +90, +90, +90. Just keep doing that pattern. Back down to the bottom, to the middle, to the top, etc., etc. And then draw as good a wave as you can. And there we have our sketch of that graph. From the amplitude, the midline, and the sine cosine tells us where to start. All right, so that's how we can do those transformations. It is a lot, but we'll practice it for a while. So let me give you a few practice problems to take a look at. The first one, you're going from a graph. See if you can identify the midline and the amplitude to let you write the equation. And here, hopefully you can identify again the midline and the amplitude from the equation to put on a graph. Good luck.